Armored Core games have had many different heads-up displays. Some worked well, and others were just way too busy. In this video, I break down every aspect of the heads-up display, and AC6 has one of the best HUDs I've seen. It has a balance of information, but doesn't clutter the screen, so you can still see all of your surroundings. Starting with the cyan diamond, this is your mission objective marker, and will move to point you in the direction you need to travel. Sometimes it'll be replaced by a TRG for target in missions where a specific unit or object needs to be destroyed and has become visible. The next important thing to watch out for is the red alert icons. It'll either come as this bright red cowboy hat looking icon here, or as a square around the enemies as their weapons are drawn. Both mean an imminent attack is inbound and should either boost out of there immediately or activate your shield. If you do activate your shield right after the icon pops up, this is known as initial guard. You will further reduce the damage and stagger. The icon can also pop up smaller and in orange when there are just other weapon systems firing, missiles flying around, or other warning systems that you should be cautious of in your current position. For the rest, we will go from top to bottom. In general, the top is left empty and clean. Occasionally, they'll put subtitles there, which I've honestly never seen that in a game in that location, but it makes perfect sense. We're able to read what they're saying while still maintaining a combat presence. The only other time you'll see something in the top section is in boss battles, where their stagger and health bars are visible. If you want to learn more about stagger in AC6, I suggest watching this video here, where I explain a bunch of findings over all of the early access content. Back on the left side of the HUD, we have the speedometer, which could be helpful to gauge relative motion to enemies. However, in general, you probably just won't pay attention to it. The only benefit of speed I've seen so far is that you can increase your impact damage from weapons in boost kick, but only in assault mode, so I'm unsure if speed is worth monitoring. Similarly, to the right side, there's an altitude gauge, which seems equally useless, but still looks kind of cool. Now let's go ahead and jump into the main targeting reticle, which is the most important part of the HUD, which I consider is all part of this hub. Let me rhyme at you. No, just kidding. This is what separates AC6 from the past IPs. They used to be more of a third-person shooter where you'd have to manually point and aim your reticle, and now that reticle will just move and lock onto enemies that are within range, removing the precision and potentially reducing some customization choices for upgrading parts that used to give you a larger reticle hub. Now, this has been a heavily debated topic by influencers in the community. Many people are hating this new target assist, but no one's really played it except for the influencers, and all of them are pretty happy with it, and it seems like it's going to be a fun, good game, especially for the campaign, and maybe at the PvP front, there could be some consequences. You know, if it just auto-locks, you click all 4 buttons, and you can land your shots. But I really think the distancing, being in the correct distance, having that FCS that actually lines up the shots properly, no ricochet, there are a lot of other concepts that we might not know about that could make PvP a lot of fun. Looking back at the reticle hub, and specifically the crosshair, you will notice sometimes it's not always on target. See, the distance from the target can be incredibly important in battles. You will spend a lot of effort maintaining that perfect distance for your loadout. The fire control system, FCS, that part will determine how effective your target assist is at different ranges. Once you decide which weapons you want to rock, and then you buy that, you need to compare with your FCS to make sure that you're supporting the aiming of that weapon system. You will need to consider their base target tracking, and then compare their range limit with the FCS to make sure they're working well together. I can only guess what the range brackets are, but I'm going to speculate based on the max range being at 2500 and doing a little comparison of the different weapon systems. If we look at the short range weapons like shotguns and plasma pistols are 0 to 500. Most medium-ranged weapons like rifles, cannons, some missiles are typically in the 500 to 1000, and I believe long range is over 1000 and could only find long-range missiles. Maybe there's shoulder-mounted snipers or cannons. Feel free to comment below if you found anything else. Back to the crosshair, you will see that when you are in the correct distance, your crosshair will line up with your target and it will turn red. This means that your shots should land. Now, looking at the rest of the reticle hub, you'll see the top. It populates with the enemy data, including the stagger bar and health of the target. This will also match the top of any bosses that you may encounter. And just above the health of the enemy, you will sometimes see an unaware status. This means there is an element of stealth in this game. Not sure if it provides any extra damage or impact to stagger, but it does mean that you can get a first strike if you take good pathing. There are also damage response states. Shout out to Oseraphic, probably the best in-depth breakdown video I've seen yet. other than my own, of course. No, definitely check out his channel and all the other channels I used footage from. Starting with the standard hit response when in gray text. This just represents you landed an attack, and the damage was calculated with the base damage minus the base damage type resistance, energy, impact, or explosive. When an enemy is staggered, this hit will turn red. This represents a direct hit, which bypasses damage resistances, and it also has some text below, but the only words I can make out are critical in a couple places. Feel free to comment below if you can decipher what all that's saying. We then have the armor response state. This represents an additional defense that is either directional or timed that will heavily reduce damage. Even in stagger, if you're attacking an armored section, it will have that reduced damage. You will need to find and target weak/vulnerable spots to bypass this armor. The last damage response state is Ricochet, which will heavily reduce damage and could lead to potential self-inflicted damage. When watching the video closely and in slow-mo, you can see sometimes the hand cannons will only do 6 damage in Ricochet, or they will do 139 damage. I think this has to do with distance, especially since the hand cannons are close-range weapons. Maybe shooting them further away results in a ricochet and that minimal damage. It might be a new classification of armor that you just need to be really close to in general, or it just won't do damage. Moving on to the sides of the reticle hub, you will see your ammo bars, which is my favorite part of the HUD. The thick bars represent the current ammo available to fire. This is also represented in numeric form at the bottom, which also includes your total supply for the mission. In terms of placement, you have a right arm, right outside, right back, right shoulder on the right inside, left arm, left outside, and left back, left inside. Now, the thin bars will be added in if a weapon has a charge capability. In this case, both back weapons have charged attacks, and as they are charged, the thin bars fill with yellow and flash once they're primed. Then you can release a devastating blow. In this case, it is called an energy weapon. And I said energy, not electric. Okay, I'm not an animal. I just misspoke last video. Hey, thanks for the call out, guys. I really appreciate it. But because this is an energy weapon, it has an overheat mechanic, represented by the red bars cooling off. You will then need to monitor this and try to balance firing and keeping the weapon cool. For kinetic and explosive weapons, every shot will chunk that gray part of the ammo proportionate to the clip size until empty. Then, when reloading, it will trigger a similar red bar cooldown that also fills back up, then signifying you can fire again. I also did a little math on charged attacks and found that they can be very ammo efficient. This rifle, for example, does 359 damage in a regular shot, but will do 2,217 damage for a charged shot. That's more than 6 rounds worth of damage. Some weapons will consume more than 1 round for a charge attack, so it may vary, but in general, the damage per round has always been better for charged attacks. The last thing to know about the reticle hub is that certain enemies will have this icon on their AC. This represents a combat log, and if you successfully defeat that enemy, you can earn rewards in the garage after the mission. Moving on to the lower part of the hub, just to clarify the numerical ammo in the bottom right, the top line represents how much is available to fire now, and the bottom number represents the total remaining for the mission or arena combat. In the bottom center, we have the stagger bar, which, just like our opponents, if maxed out, can leave you very vulnerable and susceptible to additional damage, so make sure you monitor that and try not to get staggered. Below the stagger bar, we have the boost bar, which represents how much energy you have for your thrusters. Make sure not to leave yourself stuck out in the open when you run out, which is when the bar will flash red. Generally, try not to fully extinguish your boost, or else there's a small delay and it's less efficient than just letting it build up when it's not fully used. On the bottom left, you have the armor points or health. When they reach 0, your AC has been destroyed. It feels really cool to have customized your AC in every component that either adds or detracts from your armor points. I have always loved this system of health. It's very unique compared to other games, as well as the need to pay for repairs at the end of the mission. It rewards those who do a really efficient playthrough and survive using very little AP. Next, we're going to move on to the repair kits. This is something I'm not super excited about, but we will be able to do repairs within a mission. In the showcase, it gave back 4,000 armor points, and they can be upgraded to up to 6,000 AP if you max tune the operating system. Then we have the scan below that, used to scout ahead, behind walls, obstacles. It appears to be a very short cooldown, and you can lock onto enemies through the walls. There's then the expansion box. This is a support or special weapon that can be equipped and has very limited uses. Some expansions provide defensive buffs like this giant bubble shield, but there can also be offensive abilities. Very excited to see what other special abilities that we can unlock. At the bottom of the screen, we have the compass radar. This is honestly a huge improvement over the old ACs, where you'll be able to see enemies as red squares. If they're above you, the arrow points up, and if they're below you, it points down. It'll then put another square around your current target that you're locked on. If you're level, the arrows will disappear. It's so simple and easy to use. I love it. Hey, we're trying to build a community here to talk about mech builds, lore, PvP, tips and tricks, and everything to do with AC6. That wraps up our HUD talk, but I'm Caveman, the content producer for Polemos, and we are just getting this channel started. If you like this video, please smash that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.